something that's a result of being in a hostage situation, not specifically a literal hostage situation, but mentally you've been taken hostage by something. It's a condition where the person that's been taken hostage begins to feel sympathy, or they feel a bond for their captor. And it started, or the first instance of it was in Stockholm, Sweden, in 1973, which is where it gets its name from, where armed robbers tried to rob a bank, and they took these people here, and they held them hostage for 6 days. And in those 6 days, nobody really heard what was going on in the bank, but when they emerged from the bank, all of a sudden they didn't want to push charges against the people that were holding them, and they didn't want, they felt bad for them. They didn't actually feel upset that they had been in there for 6 days. What it is really is the survival instinct that protects a person's mind when all hope of escape is lost. A good example in more modern times is the case of J.C. Lee Dugard, the woman here. In 1991, when she was 11, she was kidnapped, and she was held in a man's house for 18 years, where he would abuse her mentally and physically until eventually she just started to accept the fact that she was going to be there for the rest of her life. Because she lost hope, she ended up suffering from Stockholm syndrome. She had multiple chances to escape, and because she would help him run his own home business where she'd answer the door, but because nobody had recognized her because she was kidnapped as a child, it wasn't until 18 years that someone actually recognized her and called the police. But if nobody had called the police, she would have stayed there because she wanted to stay there. And it's not just in cases where people are kidnapped, it's also abusive relationships, cult members, prisoners of war, and also child soldiers, which brings me to my first book, A Long Way Gone, which probably most of you know the plot of it because it was one of our ISU books, but for those of you that don't know, it's a book about a child named Ishmael Bey, and when he was 12, he was kidnapped by the army and forced to become a soldier. And because he believed that his family was dead and he had no hope and he thought that he was just going to die there, he accepted their training and he didn't fight back, and he ended up with Stockholm syndrome. And he just agreed with what they were doing, and he became a child soldier. He was rescued when he was 16, but he still continued to fight against being rescued, and he still was haunted by his past as a child soldier. The movie that I watched, was called Mom and Dad. You probably haven't seen it because it's not a very popular movie. It's very graphic. But in the movie, a girl named Lena is kidnapped from her job at the airport by a girl named Birdie. And Birdie has been held captive by two people only known as Mom and Dad since she was a child, and they raised her as their own child, and they put Lena through the same kind of abuse as Birdie to try to condition her mind to accepting the fact that they will be her new parents. Not Lena, but Birdie is suffering from Stockholm syndrome in the movie because she completely agrees with what the parents do to Lena. She tries to get Lena to stop resisting and tries to keep her there, and in the end, Lena escapes, and she has to end up killing Birdie because Birdie doesn't want to escape, and she's trying to hold Lena there. The third book that I read was Escape from Camp 14. It's an autobiography of the man Shin Dong-hyuk. He's North Korean, and he grew up in the concentration camps there. He eventually escaped from them, and he lived his life as a refugee, and he's still constantly haunted by his past. But because he was raised in that concentration camp, he accepted the values of the camp, and he suffered from Stockholm syndrome for most of his childhood. The guards there acted as his parents and told him that they would gave him the feeling that he was protected by the guards rather than his parents. He completely rejected his parents as the idea of them being his parents, and he more adopted the ideas of the guards in the camp. A quote from the book, trying to describe how he struggled. He was, unlike those who have survived a concentration camp, Shin had not been torn away from a civilized existence and forced to descend into hell. He was born and raised there. He accepted its values. He called it home. And this example of Stockholm Syndrome is a much more relevant example for my topic because it shows the parent-child relationship and how we see Stockholm Syndrome in the world every day. We just don't look at it. And that's my question that I thought of, is modern society suffering from its own form of Stockholm Syndrome? Which, because you've never heard of it, makes it seem like a silly concept, but really maybe that's why you haven't heard of it, because they don't want people to think that they're being controlled. Sorry. This is a picture from North Korea of all the people worshiping their leaders. When you see this, you think those poor people, they're being, technically they are being held hostage in their country, but they seem brainwashed, and you almost feel pity for them because they don't know that what's going on isn't right. Even when sorry, I'm spacing on his name, but when the previous leader died, I mixed them up. But when he died, everyone was confused.
Oh, Kim Jong-il.
Yeah, because they were very upset by his death, and they thought that, well, if he's oppressing them and he's controlling them, they should be happy by his death. But really, they were all being, or it's debated whether or not they were being forced to be upset, because they were not only, if they weren't upset, the reason they were crying would have been because they feared what would happen if they weren't upset. And to me, when I see this, I immediately began to think of this, which is Obama's inauguration in Washington. And I don't really see a difference between the way that North Koreans worship their government and the way we do. Modern government is actually very similar to Stockholm Syndrome. The way that we view our government is we see them as protectors, and they run the country and they do things that we don't want to do. But really, we could probably take care of ourselves without their help. It's just we don't want to, because we are still very young as a race, and we want to be protected. We want to have our needs provided by people, so we don't have to do the dirty work. Even though we live in a democratic society, we don't get to actually make the laws. If we decide that for some crazy reason murder should be legal, if everybody in the country decides that, we don't actually get to decide it. It goes through the people in the government, and they're the ones that will decide if it's legal. So really, they're the ones making the rules here, and we just have to follow them. And if we don't follow them, we'll be forced to go to jail and suffer pain, humiliation, and exile from our life right now. And it seems like we probably couldn't live without the government, but actually many anarchist states exist throughout the world. They're just not very large. A good example of one of them is this. It's Freetown, Christiana in Netherlands, I believe. And there is a small community of less than 200 people, but they have no laws. There's no cars. There's cars, but they're not driven inside the town. It's very peaceful there, and there's not a lot of crime because people don't want to commit crime. It's a place where the good people can be, and they don't have to worry about laws. Another place closer to here is home, which is in Washington, D.C. And nobody hears about it because you don't think that an anarchist state could exist, because we're taught that anarchy is a terrible thing and it's violent, and without the government everything would just collapse. And it's possible that it would, but not everybody is that hostile that they would make it collapse. And going back to the way that we see our government, we want them to protect us and to provide for us, and a lot of it is very similar to the way that a child views a parent. Right from when they're born, children are very vulnerable. If you took a baby and you left it on a mountain, it would not survive. They rely completely on their parents or on other adults to take care of them. So it's very easy for this power relationship to be abused. A lot of times parents will discipline their children, and that is necessary, obviously, because children need to learn right and wrong, but a lot of the times it can go too far. But then even in abuse cases, a lot of the times children won't feel that upset about, they won't feel against their parents, they'll more feel like some kids have it worse, and they start to believe that because other people have it worse, that it's not bad for them. And because they think that, they end up not feeling like they're being abused, and they go with what their parents are saying. And in reality, that's just another way to suffer from Stockholm Syndrome, because they're agreeing with what their parents say and they have no choice to do. So, like, if they were being held hostage by a person that wasn't their parent, and they were forced to, say, mow their lawn for some reason, they wouldn't have any choice in the matter. And if your parents tell you to go mow the lawn, you don't really have a choice in the matter either. Because they rely on their parents from such a young age, they end up accepting their parents' values and accepting what their parents tell them as the truth. And because they accept that is the truth, they don't really have any freedom to think, even though we say that children can decide for themselves, they can pick what they wear, pick what they eat, but when it comes to the big topics, such as like religion and politics, a lot of children just go with what their parents say. And mentioning religion, that's another form of Stockholm Syndrome. A lot of times people get their religion from their parents, at least originally. Some people do change religions or just completely lose their religions, but a lot of the times when children are young, they grow up with what their parents have told them in their religion. A lot of times this can go bad, such as the Westboro Baptist Church. A lot of their views are pushed on young children, and the children don't even know what the signs they're holding up mean. They just kind of go with it, and their morals are pretty much being taken from them, and they're being held hostage in that kind of situation. Religion in general is also a form of Stockholm Syndrome, because a lot of people are religious, they see their gods as merciful, and if they don't follow the rules of their religion, they can fear suffering, or they can fear going to hell. They believe that their God will end up providing for them and giving them a safe haven after they die if they follow their rules. This is similar to a hostage situation where the person that's kidnapped, someone says that if you're good, I'll release you eventually, and you can go back home, but really that's not guaranteed. In 2002, a 16-year-old girl named Bethany Hughes from Calgary was diagnosed with leukemia. She did not receive treatment for her disease because she was raised as a Jehovah's Witness, which means she couldn't have any blood transfusions because they believe that if their blood, if they have somebody else's blood in their body or any kind of organ, that their body will be impure. For example, if the person that they're getting blood from has drinking alcohol in the past, which is against their religion, and the blood goes in them, then they have the sin in their blood, and then they can no longer get into their heaven. She was so strong about her beliefs that she would traumatically rip out IVs that were giving her saline or something that wasn't against her religion, but she didn't want any kind of medical treatment for fear that they would try to trick her. She ended up dying, that's her grave, because she refused treatment, and after 6 months of living at home, she died. Afterwards, her mother tried to accuse the father and say that it was his fault that she died because he was the one that gave them their faith, and because he was the man. The mother had also adopted his religion, and so she tried to sue him and say that it was his fault that her daughter had died. I don't believe that he was charged for that. I think it was let go, but it was argued that he was the one that gave her the faith, so he was also the one that killed her. Many people that don't follow the rules of their church will be kicked out or will fear exile from their community and everything that they know and their family. And so they're pretty much forced to obey just because they don't want to lose everything they have. So it's pretty obvious that as a society we do suffer from some kind of Stockholm Syndrome. We believe that the government, or we follow our government, our parents, our religion, and we do it without question. It is possible for us to change as a society, obviously, because we continue to progress, but for us to be able to grow up as a country, we're going to have to be able to get our own state of anarchy and dissolve government, because we need to be able to realize that we can provide for ourselves and we don't need to follow authority figures just because they're bigger than us. This isn't a new concept. In 1851, a philosopher named Arthur Schopenhauer, it's foreign, said the similar thing to what I'm saying now. He said, "No child under the age of 15 should receive instruction in subjects which may possibly be the vehicle of serious error, such as philosophy or religion, for wrong notions imbibed early can seldom be rooted out, and all of the intellectual faculties, judgment is the last to arrive at maturity." I'm sure you've heard that because we're under 18, all of our brains aren't connected yet, and we make reckless decisions because we don't have all of our neural pathways or whatever. And that's essentially why young children shouldn't be taught this is right, this is wrong outright, and shouldn't be given concrete answers to questions that don't have a concrete answer. Sorry. I'm sick. So for us to be able to advance as a society, we need to be able to start questioning everything that is asked of us. You should, from now on, you should try and think before doing something why you're being asked to do it, how it will benefit you if you do it, and how it will benefit others, because all of that needs to be taken into consideration. You shouldn't just fear the people and what will happen if you don't do something, because that way you're actually not thinking for yourself and you're losing yourself in a modern form of Stockholm Syndrome. That's all I got.